What's going on, y'all? This is Anayochukwu. We're here with y'all with our first episode with Reimagenation podcast. I'm your favorite trauma contractor therapist. I work with different kids and different families, actually, parents included, in the areas of mental health disorders, behavioral disorders, oppositional defiance, even different areas with autism. That includes Asperger's, high-functioning autism. And so we're here to bring you some of our expertise.
Absolutely. How's everybody doing? I'm Prophet Mike. I've been in the field of counseling for many years, dealing with spiritual counseling as well as marriage counseling, drug addiction, different areas such as that. I'm excited to get into the spirit of the mind of man to discover or help reimagine the way man thinks.
No, that's so good. And I've been working, I guess, a little over a year now as a trauma therapist, as a trauma contracted therapist for the state of New Jersey. And one thing I noticed, like a lot of times with my generation, I've noticed like now it's the generation of mental health disorders. What can you speak on that? I feel like your generation definitely had mental illness.
Oh, no, definitely. Absolutely. A lot of times what happens is as the generations progress and move on, in my generation and even in generations before mine, we were pretty much told and everything, don't say anything. If you're dealing with mental illness, dealing with struggles, dealing with trauma and everything, for the most part, especially the church, we're told to pray about it. Pray about it.
Yes,
Let's pray.
I'm familiar
Let's
with that.
pray. Let's believe God. Let's trust God. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we have to understand that man is not just physical. Man is also spiritual, which means and everything that we need to deal with both aspects of balance. We need to deal with the physical man and we need to deal with the spiritual man. So for the most part, it's not that my generation didn't deal with mental illness. It's just we hid it well.
No, so you said the spirituality aspect. Now I know from my study and for psychology, our understanding of people in that diaspora, our understanding of psychology is the psyche. So the psyche, that spirit, breath, and soul.
Yeah.
So when you break down the word psychology, you have psyche and ology. So ology is a Greek root.
Absolutely.
The study of psyche, spirit, breath. Breath means life, and
Absolutely.
soul. So like, I feel like I believe that now we've kind of went away from that.
Yes.
Before, like, multiple personality disorders was like spiritual, and we broke it down like that and some of the older psychology. Now we've drawn away from understanding that mental illness starts in the psyche. It starts in your soul. What is the soul? The soul compartmentalizes your mind, your will, your intellect, your emotions, decision making, imagination, vain imagination, which I'm sure you could speak on a lot of that.
Absolutely.
Why do you believe that people have drawn away from that and sort of just made it sort of like, I don't know, like as if you're sick, you know?
When you look at man as a whole and everything, man tends to want to follow systems, right? They feel more comfortable in following step-by-step patterns. When you're dealing with the spirit of man, there's no step-by-step pattern. You have to search and you have to delve deep within the origin of these things in order to identify. When man was created, man was not created flesh first. Man was created spirit first, right? Even as you shared and everything, that is breath, right? The psyche is breath.
Yes.
We tend more to focus on the natural mind than we do on the spiritual mind aspect. When God breathed into man the breath of lives, He breathed into them their psyche.
Yes.
He breathed into them their mind. He breathed into them their personality. He breathed into them their character. And then it says man became a living being. Right? So what are we doing? We're dealing with the product of the living being. We're not dealing with the origin of the living being the spirit.
That's so good. In the mental health context, we have a saying, it's called everything psychological is biological. And even that stems a lot when you talk about depression. Is it correlational or causational? So when I have depression, is it because of the things shooting off my brain, the cortisol, the hormones, the epinephrine, all of that? Is it because of that, or does my brain shoot that off because I'm experiencing this? But I have my own saying, and I would like to make this as the Anayochukwu mental health saying that everything psychological is biological and everything biological is spiritual.
There you go.
Because we go in, how was man made?
Absolutely.
Man didn't just come. I know a lot of people, Big Bang Theory. Man didn't just come from an atom.
No.
Man came, like you said, it breathed life.
Absolutely.
It breathed the psyche.
That's it.
What is the psyche? This is where the thoughts happen. Emotions.
There you go.
Emotions are, people say, I remember I would ask professors, I think I was in undergrad, I was being said, like, so do emotions are in the heart? So, like, if I'm sad, like, is it because my heart is sad? If I'm sad, or if I'm mad, or if I'm embarrassed, if I'm, I don't know, feeling shameful, is it in my heart? And I had a professor say that it's in your brain. It's in your brain. Now, I think it goes a little deeper than that, because they said the biological. So I don't believe that it's biological. I believe it happened before biological.
Absolutely. What happens and everything, a lot of times biology is a response to spirituality.
Let me stop. I'm excited. Thank you.
All right.
Thank
It's
you.
a response to it, right? We live in a reactionary society, right? We don't act, we react.
Yeah.
And that's the state of man.
Yeah.
Man reacts. So your biology responds to your spirituality. So because we've, through the course of time, have focused more on things we can touch, things we can see, things that we can feel, just because we don't see it, we trick ourselves into believing it doesn't exist. And that's why we're so really stunted in the growth of understanding the mind. It's because we start on step 2 instead of starting on step 1. We start from the reaction to the action. The action being the spirit, the reaction being the biological.
And that's so deep. In the mental health context, there's this modality or this frame of reference when dealing with mental illness, or politically correct, with mental health. And that it's called a biopsychosocial modality, a biopsychosocial model, essentially saying that the bio is genetic, psycho means history that happened in your psychology, history of how you were born, your unconscious thought patterns and all of that, and then and then social, so your environment, what happened to you environmentally. So when we speak about the biology, they ask, so has people in your family had bipolar? Have they had depression? Have they had psychosis? All of this. And then we think that it's like, it's because of your blood. The blood has memory. Well, technically, the blood genes do have memory. Yeah.
So good.
But we think like it's because the dripping blood had memory and the dripping blood talked to the other blood to prompt that. And I believe that it's more than the biology.
Absolutely. What's so powerful about it and everything, what you're saying is true and is false at the same time. That it is the blood, but it's the spiritual aspect of a biological thing.
And would you say that about like generational curses?
Absolutely.
All of that.
Absolutely, because what happens and everything, you have to understand throughout time, everything that happens comes forth as a result of blood. The Word of God says and everything, the life is in the blood, right? But the life of the blood is actually water. Right? So man is made and everything from the dust of the ground, but the dust wasn't just dry, it was also wet and pliable, right? So what happens and everything, that from the beginning of time and what has consistently been perpetuated through existence is a bloodline. And in that bloodline are spiritual aspects of what God has spoken and what God has created. It's called a predisposition, or being predisposed. That's why sometimes people and everything come from a family of addiction, and they'll do drugs and they'll get hooked. And then another person has no drugs in their family. They'll do the same exact thing and nothing will happen to them, and they can go on, they can live their life. Why? It's because the bloodline or the blood has basically predisposed or prepared your mind to absorb something that somebody else's mind can't.
No, that's the exact word. It's called genetic predisposition.
That's it.
But it's bigger than your genetic. It's bigger than, Auntie May had diabetes. Uncle Ricky had high blood pressure. And even, watch this. I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself. We're just looking at the disorder. But we're not... When we say, I have diabetes running in my bloodline, I have high blood pressure running in my bloodline, which is also my testimony as well. Yeah. We don't say, I have this generational tendency, I have this generational habit, I have this generational lack of self-control. We don't do that. We just say the diabetes just got here.
Yeah.
No, the butter, it came through the butter, it came through the sugar, it came through the salt. It came through all of that hot sausage and everything else that you making and every pig organ that you can happen. But
its response.
Talk about it.
Its response is different in your body
Yes.
than it is in somebody else's body.
And why is that?
Because it's in your blood. It's connected to your generations.
Yes.
It's prepared you.
Yes.
It's like this. I say this all the time. My kids understand this when I say this. When I go to sleep at night, I wash the dishes.
Mm-hmm.
The sponge that I use is soaking wet.
Mm-hmm.
In the morning when I come back, the sponge is bone dry. When I take that sponge and put a little bit of water, it absorbs it so quick. Why? Because it's desiring or thirsting something it didn't have before. Our brains are like sponges.
Yes, literally.
When it's lacking the things that it desires, when it comes around it, it absorbs it quicker than other things. Why? Because you've been conditioned for it through your bloodline.
So we had this family reach out to us, and I've had this question. I wanted to pick your brain about it. By the way, shameless plug, we do work with different families in the state of New Jersey, South Jersey, and Philadelphia area, or the tri-state area. And we were working with one of these families that reached out to us, and they had troubled youth, you know what I mean? And then I kind of noticed that some of the families, like, they have, like, grief history. And so I was curious what role you think grief has in, like, maladaptive presentation, negative child behaviors.
What often happens a lot of times, because we don't know how to deal with grief properly.
Mm-hmm.
People don't. And that's where addictions come from a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
That's where self-harm comes from a lot of times. But when you as a parent don't know how to deal with grief, you create an environment where you make grief normal, where it becomes part of the climate. It becomes part of the atmosphere, and the child, remember the children and everything, they're growing, they're forming, so whatever they're introduced to becomes part of their day-to-day activities. I don't know if you've ever had this in your life where your mother, your father, whoever would be angry and you'd be angry. Where they'd be happy, you'd be happy. You adapt to their emotions, right? You have to understand that parents, right, authority, more so authority figures, they are thermostats. Right? They are thermostats. They're supposed to regulate the temperature or the atmosphere of the home. Children are thermometers. Children become the temperature of where they're at.
They feel the temperature.
They don't respond to it, they become it. They reflect it, right? So in my house, I have a thermostat. It's chilly. I change the temperature. It becomes nice and warm, right? I also have a thermometer in my refrigerator. When the refrigerator is working, it stays at a certain temperature. When it's not, it lowers. So it adjusts to the temperature of the room. Your children will always adjust to your temperature.
That's so good. I just finished working with one of the families that we work with.
Okay.
And we talked about, I talked to them about how children are a lot of times like cats. And so maybe dogs too. So when I say that, I was speaking to a specific behavior I noticed in cats. Like, they'll kind of like do this thing where they like kind of like, I guess, nestle around your ankles and your leg. And like if they feel, sometimes the cat might hit you out of nowhere. And I believe that children are similar in that, to the effect of what you're saying, that parents co-regulate children. Yeah. And unfortunately, sometimes children co-regulate parents. In other words, if they're not feeling a response from you, if they're feeling like, okay, mommy, like, I'm trying to get affection, I'm trying to get comfort, I'm trying to get gratification, and mommy's stressed, mommy's dealing with this, she's dealing with that, she's just checked out. The child, they don't know, but you're inciting anxiety and anxiousness in your child because of your inability to regulate yourself. So in other words, you're co-regulating the atmosphere to where now you think because you're sad that, oh, children are always happy. No, your sadness is creating anxiety. Your sadness is building into, is building, this might be a reach, but it's not. I'll just say it. Your sadness is building into potential for mental health disorder. Absolutely.
But I have a question. I pose a question to you. And sometimes what happens is, so what is the reason? What is the reason that children regulate their parents, and why do children fall into that pattern of actually allowing it to happen?
Of children co-regulating their parents, because the parents don't have the tools for their own self-regulation and self-soothing, and when they don't have the tools for their own daily life self-soothing, and then on top of that they're dealing with a child who has unfamiliar or really just overwhelming presentation, they kind of like, I'm gonna use your word, they kind of placate things.
You love that word. You love that word.
No, that's my word. That was the first time I ever heard that word, and I was offended. But we'll talk about that in a few. But they kind of placate it, and that's a simple way of doing it. They placate it, but they don't realize that your inability to address this is now affecting everybody.
And that goes back to the grief aspect, right? Because whenever remember, grief is not just death. It's a sense of loss in whatever fashion. If it's divorce, if it's separation, if it's termination, you lose your job or something like that, what ends up happening, wherever the parent is not receiving love from, or feeling peace from, or joy from, or feeling comfort from, what they end up doing is they end up providing it through their children, right? Giving their children what they want, so their children give them what they want. So now what you're doing is you're training your child into seeing your grief as an opportunity to get what they want.
And I see that so much. And honestly, I see that a lot because most of the times the people that come and work with us, every now and then it'll be a father, but a lot of times the father wants to be checked out and will work with moms a lot, or aunts, or the grandmas. And a lot of times what I see, they do this thing where it's like, I'm gonna just kind of like give them what they want, just to shut them up and everything like that. Yeah, and let me just do. Oh, they just want this. Oh, to shut them up. But they don't realize that they're setting a precedence that, and this is deep.
Conditioning their
You're
child.
conditioning your child to learn that if I inconvenience you, I get what I want.
Absolutely.
So you're teaching them to manipulate.
Absolutely.
Because you don't have tools.
Absolutely.
You don't have tools in your bag, and that's what I love about a lot of the things different families we work with, and just seeing their journey. And a lot of them it takes to develop rapport and develop trust with us to really take these tools and decide that, hey, if I stick with it long enough, that it'll work. Because a lot of time, one thing I've seen is that they'll get discouraged because when we start working with them, the behaviors will shoot up. But I believe that it's normal.
Absolutely. But one thing I've noticed about, okay, let me see if I can put it in this context. When a tree is growing, right? It's tender, it's soft, it's pliable, it's shapeable, and it's formable. If the fruit grows, or if there's weight applied to it before it's able to carry a weight, it changes its course, it changes its shape, it changes its direction. So when a plant is growing, right? I always use this story. When you go into New York City, Manhattan specifically, on the city streets, you find concrete, cement, but then there are squares of dirt with trees. But those trees have two wooden poles on each side of it. One pole pulls it to the right, another one pulls it to the left. Why? A tree on its own can't grow straight. And if you don't have a stick on either side pulling it in opposite directions, it's not going to grow straight. For the most part, the family structure in today's society, they have one stick. And most times it's a mother, not a father, pulling the child emotionally.
Watch it.
All right, pulling the child emotionally, right? So what happens? Based upon the other pole not being there, then this child can grow up one of two ways. They can grow up overly emotional, or they can grow up as a womanizer, and they can become their lack, or they can try to supplant their lack with a behavior cycle in their lives. So you have to realize that for a parent, when their child is growing up, your child is not your confidant.
My God.
Your child is not your counselor.
Not your husband.
It's not your husband.
Or
it's
your
not your
boyfriend.
wife. Right? It's not your wife. It's not. It's not. It's basically, it's your child. Your job is to raise the child straight. That means, okay, the man is not there. I understand that. But you have to have a representation in that child's life, whether it be an uncle, whether it be absolutely. There
some
has
male
to be.
figure
It
that
has
has
to be.
some sort of consistent role in their life.
Has to be.
One thing I noticed with working with the mothers, and I'm curious on what your take is on this. One thing I noticed is that in the mothers, and a lot of times in their mothers' efforts to raise the child in the best suitable quality way that they know how, that they'll raise them and give them their love language, if you will, or their parenting language, as you will, as if all they need is your affection.
Mm-hmm.
But what they don't realize is a lot of times they'll give them affection, they'll give them hugs, they'll give them options, they'll give them, oh, what do you want? What do you want this? But what I see is that through their efforts to nurture them and meet their needs, that they give them so much freedom and no boundaries and options with everything, that they don't actually realize that now when you ask them every time, oh, what do you think, Johnny? What do you want, Johnny? Like a lot of times I'll come in and I'll say, hey, we're going to do this today. We're going to go to the library. We're going to do this. And the moms will always ask them, hey, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? And that what they don't realize that they're doing is that by giving them so much options and so much unlimited say-so, you're actually overwhelming them.
Absolutely.
And you're putting them in an adult role. Because a child doesn't really know what they want.
Absolutely.
They think they know what they want. But I'm just curious, like, what do you think about when that part? What do you think about when mothers will do that, and then on top of that as well, that they don't realize that a lot of times that they also need instruction.
What happens a lot of times and everything, and it's understandable. Like for me, I was raised by my mother. My father and everything was there, but sporadically, in and out. And my mother did everything that she could do. But there are things that a woman can never do.
Yes.
Right? They can do physical things, right? They can be present. But there's a level of discipline that comes from a man that's required. Like I said, you need a pole on both sides. One pulling it towards discipline, one pulling it towards emotions.
Yeah.
That child and everything is balanced inside. But what happens oftentimes is because of being familiar with taking care of their child by themselves for so long, they've gotten to a place where they've convinced themselves and everything that they don't need that. They don't need nobody else to come in. They can take care of this situation, take care of that situation and everything. And what I say to that is, because I've heard people say this before, as far as not around, there's no men around and everything like that. Absolutely, 100%. And I agree with you. You're doing the best that you can do. But in you doing the best you can do, you have to identify there's things that you were never created to do. You were never created to do. And when the opportunity comes, and it's the key here, a lot of times when the opportunity comes for a man to come into the life, it may not be your boyfriend, may not be your future husband, but it may be a male that wants to help you raise that child or instruct that child or discipline that child. You resist them from doing it. You stop them from doing it. You tell them you ain't his daddy. You tell them and everything like that. You ain't paying the bills and everything like that. No, you have to stop thinking about what you don't have and look at an opportunity for your child to get something that he requires. Because even though you may not have had it, there's an opportunity for your child to be better than you are.
That's so good, and my brain went so many places. I'm reminded of, I forget who told me this, but they said that when an individual goes long enough without something, they'll convince themselves that they don't need it.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, and that this might be a big question. What do you believe is the cause of mental health disorder?
Honestly, what I believe is the cause of mental health disorder is improper self-image, right? Based upon understanding the original self-image, right? The original structure, right? First of all, we have to understand this, that mental health issues are not just biological, but they're spiritual, right? They're spiritual. What do I mean by this? We've been made spirit first, and as a result of this, everything that happens to our physical body happens as a result of not understanding what's taking place in the spirit realm, right? When we experience traumas in our life at ages, traumas occur when you don't understand what it is you're going through, and your comprehension or your understanding of it is broken, right? When that understanding or comprehension of it is broken, it leaves doors of access for spiritual activity to take place, demonic spiritual activity. Why? Because ultimately, the enemy, the devil, demons, spirits, and everything, they want to destroy man's image, right? They want to destroy man's. That's the reason why there's such a high level of attack on men. The reason there's such a high level of attack on man is because the image, and this may be a dangerous statement to make and everything, but the image of every boy and every girl does not come from the mother.
My understanding, and I'm gonna leave that one alone. My understanding for mental health, this is my personal, observation, is my understanding, is that I believe, let's be generous, I believe at least 90% of mental health disorders, I'll put it there, is trauma induced. Mm-hmm. Because, and you said trauma happens when they don't know what's going on. That's exactly what trauma is. Trauma happens anytime your psyche, your mind, encounters a negative or what they call aversive stimuli that they cannot cope with, that they don't have the tools to cope with. Absolutely. Your brain malfunctions, malwares. I don't know if that's a computer term, right? I know you're the IT guy, and now you end up thinking, behaving, interacting with the world based upon your inability to manage what they would call a psychological wounding or an emotional wounding, trauma.
I'm going to say something to challenge what you just said. Okay. You said malfunction. Mm-hmm. It's not a malfunction. It's actually the function of the mind.
I stand corrected. No, listen. You're deep. You're deep.
Because what happens and everything, in order to save you, your mind shuts down.
That's what disassociation is.
That's it.
That's what.
Because if it didn't shut off, you would overload, and you would kill yourself, or you would be done.
Y'all don't realize how strong the imagination is. This is how strong the mind is. You'll have someone who just committed a heinous crime. You know what I mean? I don't want to say words that might flag and mess up our algorithm. But let's say they unalived somebody. Yes. They unalived somebody, right? The cops come to their house. They interrogate this woman or this man. Because they did something in the heat of the moment, they will literally say no. And if they were to scan their heartbeat in their mind, they are telling the truth. Absolutely. Because their mind literally divorced with reality to cope with the stress of what just happened. So that's how strong the mind is.
I'm telling you. So when we say something malfunction, right? Yeah. It's the function of the brain and everything to preserve itself, right? It's like the fight or flight and everything, right? When you're confronted with a situation that's deadly, in order to preserve you, in order to maintain, it shuts down. And that's why a lot of times people and everything years later are struggling with issues in life, because it didn't happen years later. It happened when you were younger, but you weren't able to cope with it then. So your mind went on download. Your mind shut off. And then when you get older, it starts coming back because now your brain is developed to a place where you can understand it now because you couldn't understand it then.
That is so deep. And then we don't realize how. Let me ask you this. What role, this is the first episode. I don't want to get into relationships too quick, but let's just say generally relationships. Yeah. What role have you seen of people who've had this kind of corrosive psychological wounding, mental wounding, emotional wounding, this trauma? What role have you seen unaddressed, unresolved trauma play in people's day-to-day relationships?
Well, from the basic of relationships and everything, it deals with just interactions, right? Dealing with intimacies, dealing with trust, dealing with a place of agreement between each other. Why? Because people don't realize and they don't understand that, and I said this to you earlier, that the people are fields. They're fields. Whatever you sow into them eventually will produce fruit, right? Your trauma and the things you go through in life, they're seeds that have been planted in you. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. But when water comes to that seed, it starts manifesting, right? What does that mean? You could be in a beautiful relationship. You could have a person that loves you and you love them, but because you were raped, because you went through situations where you've seen people become unalive, using the words properly and everything, because we want to make sure everybody's safe. Those situations that you have blacked out, or those things that have been disassociated in your mind, will begin to come back again. Why do they come back? Because now you're in an environment of safety. Now you're in a place of love. Now you're in a place of water, right? You're in a water relationship. But water doesn't just cause good things to grow.
Anything, weeds.
Anything. Water causes anything to grow. Weeds, anything, right? So what happens? The water of a good relationship will water the trauma you went through that you didn't remember, and it will come back. But you won't deal with it concerning where you were, you'll deal with it concerning where you are.
Yeah.
That means that man or that woman will go through hell because of something they never did, because the love that they've given you watered something that somebody hurt you with.
And having a good resource,
yes,
whether it be a therapist, a spiritual counselor, like a religious counselor and all of that, having that resource, someone that you can trust,
absolutely,
that as the plant is being watered, that they can help not only pull out the weeds in the garden, but also prune what you're actually growing.
Absolutely.
This has been an exciting episode.
I'm excited.
Listen, episode 2 is already in the queues. We got it rolling. It's processing. We're just so excited that y'all are coming with us on this journey. Please like, share, subscribe, follow us on TikTok, on Instagram, subscribe to YouTube, and we can't wait to meet with you guys.
Absolutely. And I just want to encourage everybody that's watching. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There are things that we're going to begin to get into, things that you've wondered but you've never asked. Trust me, between myself and Anaya, we will ask and we will answer these questions. We'll be the go-between between you and the answer to your question.
All right, y'all. Take care. Thank you so much.